It says it will begin soon, so it's waiting for you for a moment. Oh, that loaded it. But I don't see any way to share my screen. Usually there's stuff I can...
Well, it doesn't show there's a viewer yet. Soren was actually trying to jump on it, it looks like.
Yeah? See, I don't have the thing on the right-hand side. I don't have the menu.
Well, yeah.
When does the game start? Oh, he was talking about it. Yeah, I don't think I can get in. It still, mine says it begins soon. It doesn't say it's running yet. Screen share. See, that's what I want. Yeah, see, you can share your screen. I can't. Probably because I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know how to. I don't know how to.
Can you invite me?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
Click on that. Now wait a minute. Share the link. Send. You could add me if you want. I'm probably in your circles. There it is.
Yeah.
There you are.
What do you see? Yeah, I'm in. Oh, now it's okay. Now it's ringing.
Oh, your phone's ringing.
I hate when that happens. Wait a minute. I've got a thing here. This should do it. Answer. There we go.
Yeah, who knows?
See, that got it. Join. You want to mute that?
I need a mute.
Or should I mute my mic? I just my microphone. I didn't. Now I did. It's not going to work, is it? Not going to be able to do this.
I can turn your video and audio off.
Well, here's what I want to do. I don't.
Oh yeah, I shared controls with you.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, yeah. I don't think this is gonna work.
If you can mute your microphone,
I can mute it again. Yeah. I just muted it. We still have this wild echo going on. Should I mute my screen? Wait a minute.
yeah, mute your speaker.
There.
Mute your microphone.
That was coming through my speaker. Okay, but can you hear it? But I'm still looking at the whole world here.
Yeah, let's see this before.
There.
John and you go.
We're having a brown bag.
It was like the
What is that?
Cloud.
Oh, yeah.
May or may not need that.
It's no big deal. I think it's just a little.
Sure, you probably have a set of objects that are set up once.
It's working.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it because it's.
The sound's all messed up?
Well, no, because yeah, I'm a delayed sound.
Yeah, you might want to mute that. What time do we have?
6:51.
Oh, it's still
take a minute and get something to drink.
Pizza, yeah. Well, something to drink might even be better. And it's beer 30 somewhere, right?
Yeah. You've got some beer in the fridge. You got pizza, soda.
Hey, Ryan?
Yeah.
Your bottle of beer was sitting on the counter in there. I don't think.
Yeah, I took that.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you would open it.
Fine.
Yeah, testing. We basically need a testing. Give us the once over because.
Yes, it was.
When I worked at Tivoli, everyone was like,
Yeah, that was a good trip.
yes. I went to John. I ended up outlawing.
I usually-
It was like, if your name was John, you can't do nothing. Yeah, you
But like if
can't
you
do nothing.
if it's raining or something, you need to get.
Well, I'm gonna call you by your last name.
So yeah, he sold his truck. Yeah, exactly.
Fortunately, I never run into
Really
that.
fun.
20 years,
Yeah, yeah.
there are a lot of little.
Yeah, there's a lot of availability. My name's like that too. I went through a period of being popular and then not popular. So
Way
it's
less
like
than
those
they need to.
Carol's roles are.
Sure.
Yeah, I was trying to get, looking at, get the Villanova.
But my name's like never been
But
really
some of them,
top.
He said, when it's cool outside, you'll walk out. It's summertime, he lives in, summer onwards, like here in Magnolia, Pennsylvania. He lives like that.
Because it kind of stays.
Yeah,
Yeah, just south of
I'll do it at the, I don't know if, are you going to the US one? I'll be doing it there too.
All right, yeah.
What time's the game start?
8. Talk fast.
Which one are you rooting for? Yeah, you're gonna have to let me know what the score is. More importantly, how Steph's doing. Right?
And so.
And you'll let me know when Dwight Howard gets ejected.
One more flight.
It's coming, right? I mean, in the first quarter, makeup call. You know, he'll throw an elbow. That'll be it.
Yeah.
The Bleacher Report.
That reminds me, how late do you normally go? As long as you want. Until you get tired of talking. Usually no more than an hour and a half is the whole thing, but it's entirely up to you. Whenever you get tired, it'll be an hour talking, we'll just wrap it up. All right, let's get things kicked off. 2 o'clock. Oh, there it is. Yep. I'm Ryan Vanderwerf. I help run the user group, and Rob, you over there, helps run it as well. And welcome everyone to Testing with Grails 3. I'll give some news and updates. Our beloved speaker, Ken, and the food's brought to you by No Fluff Just Stuff, Jay Zimmerman, and also part of Spring 1-2 GX. So coming up, I think, is it next month, right, is the No Fluff in Austin. And right there. And also this weekend, it's in Dallas. Right. So you should definitely come check that out. It's a really good conference. If you can't travel far, it's great because you get a little bit of everything. Keeps it pretty affordable.
So Ken, are you just doing the Texas tour? Houston, Austin, then you go up to Dallas?
There you go. Okay. Seems like a good idea.
Yeah,
right?
he's bouncing like a ping pong ball around Texas, which is hard when it's so big. We thank them for that. We've also got news. We've got conferences coming up. We've got Great Conf EU next week. I'm going to be going there and doing my Lego talk there. It's a great conference. A lot of good stuff there. And then after that is Great Old Summit in Santa Clara, beginning of June. 11th and 12th. 11th and the 12th. And then we've got Great Conf US in Minneapolis at the end of July. And then Spring 1-2 GX in September. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Definitely try to make it to one of those if you can. Anyone who wants to ever speak at the conference here, just let me know. We have one person, Vlad, wanted to give a talk next month on, what was it called again? Java 8 functional programming in Groovy?
Groovy 2 and Java 8, coaches and its future. Also, I'm going to talk about functional programming as well.
Cool. So definitely, this is what the group's all about, having everyone in the group want to try out and talk about something. You don't necessarily be an expert about it, something you can research and put something together. This is what the point of the group is to do that. And then we get, a treat every once in a while. Someone like Ken Kousen comes and gives a talk. It's good stuff. With that, I will.
I have a request.
Yep.
Somebody would like to do a Gradle talk. I really would like to see a Gradle talk. So let me just put that out there.
I can do it if you want. So give me time to prepare.
Yeah, you're already doing one.
You're doing one.
Unless you want to switch. You want to switch topics. I can do one if we need to. So, but if someone else wants to do it, that's even better. Well, anyone else have any other news goings on about things in the community or Groovy Grails type of world? No?
Eric, the other Eric released his Groovy Validators.
Yeah, I thought he was coming to that. Where is he?
Yeah,
He's not here. He RSVP'd.
There he is over there.
Oh, duh. There he is.
Oh, you're back there, man.
He snuck in.
I was mentioned on the Grails Digest, but I didn't make the Groovy Weekly.
Yeah, the Groovy Weekly looked hastily put together, but
Yeah.
the Grails Digest was pretty comprehensive this week, and yeah, so he got mentioned in there as his validators. It's very cool stuff. Keep on rolling, man. All right, well, let's hand it over to Mr. Kousen. And
Sorry about the screen in the way. Oh, you don't have to do that. Sorry, we're all developers here. Yesterday I was over at the Austin Java users group, and that's all huge and formal, and they've got this big auditorium and everything. This is much better, much better. I guess you already know that, right? And, uh-oh. We're gonna have lag in there going through. Yeah. No, that's okay. Do you want to cut that light off to make the thing brighter? What do you think?
Off? We can.
As long as you don't snore too loudly when you fall asleep, And I do understand that the game tonight starts at 8, right? Boy, there's a lot fewer people who care about that than I thought. Whoa, that really made it dark, didn't it? All right, well, I'll mostly use the screen then. No, the game is game 6, right? No, 5. Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals, the NBA. It's Golden State against some town near here. What's that little town called? Oh yeah, Houston. Right? Yeah, exactly. You're doing. You mentioned you're doing something with Java 8 related. Oh, first I got to wave the flag, don't I? Just Stuff conference tour. Their weekend conferences. When they run 3 days, it'll be like half a day Friday and then all day. Pardon me, Saturday, Sunday. They're called No Fluff, Just Stuff because there's no vendor room, there's no marketing people. It's just technical talks on interesting subjects. As Ryan mentioned, we've got Dallas this weekend, and then there's the Gradle Summit, and then we'll be in Austin in July. And they've got I wonder if they have the schedule posted already for that. It looks like they do. Let's magnify that. I don't know why it's so small. No, Matt's talking about Docker, and there's JavaScript stuff, functional programming in JavaScript. Ugh, sorry, I didn't mean to shudder like that, but Venkat Subramaniam talking about Java 8. What else is going on there? Spring Boot, of course. Craig Walls is in the Dallas area. That's a good idea. That helped. Very nice. Some other stuff. I don't know. I know I'm doing something down there. I've got a Java 8 talk. Oh, and doing some Android related things. So, at any rate, just to give you an idea what sorts of things are available.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make a pitch. If I don't have any part in the NFS and the notebook stuff, but if you haven't been to one and you're thinking about, gosh, all I ever hear is the pitches on it, but I don't know anyone who's gone. They are insanely good. I mean, your career. If you can't tack $5 or $10 onto your billing rate after going to one of these things, you're not paying attention. It's really, really a great.
It is.
Wow. Well, you have to send us your PayPal number, and I'll forward it to Jay.
I've been, he's been He's been doing it since 2000.
Yeah.
And Jay does it. Jay Zimmerman does it, and it's the work of one guy who's really put a tremendous piece of work together. And I've gone many times over the years, and it really is. It's not. I'm not just saying it. Really is a great place.
Yeah, this is my 5th year on the tour. I'm really having fun with it. So I appreciate the kind words, be my guest, come along. Oh, there we go. More. Somebody has their sound turned on, right, or whatever. You could participate in the Google. So the reason I'm sitting down and everything, partly because I'm going to do some coding, and partly because I'm trying to participate on the Hangout here for the people who are in remotely. If anybody, can you tell if there's anybody in it?
I can't tell without joining, which is going to cause that terrible feedback.
Yeah, right. So don't worry about it. But
I know Soren Glacius, the great
Soren's there.
Was bugging me and saying, "Ready to get started."
Well, and be sure, for Soren, we have to, of course, mention over the Hangout, right, that Great Conf EU is next week.
That's right.
Looks like Guillaume LaForge is going to be doing a keynote on Groovy, and Jeff Brown, of all people, doing a Grails one on the last day. And there look like there's all kinds of good presentations there. I haven't been to Copenhagen yet. I really hope to go sometime. Just squeezing into the schedule is always kind of tough.
Yeah.
And then
it's kind of far.
Yeah, it's a little far. That's right. Okay, so the basic idea of what I wanted to do tonight is to talk about Grails, and specifically testing in Grails, but not just testing in general. Here, let's see if I can raise that up. Oh, that's better. I wanted to look at Grails 3. Has anybody moved to Grails 3 yet? Just one? Anybody else? What do you think of it?
It's fine, except I feel like I'm ahead of the curve on the plugins.
I'd say fine is the strongest statement in favor that I've seen so far. I've had many small annoying issues with it, a lot of little things that are issues, but I thought, I assume most of you have played with Grails at one time or another, right? Is that a reasonable statement? I figured that as part of this, I could show you Grails 3 and then focus on the testing aspect of it, but at least give you some context and everything, give you a chance to see it. I do have some slides, but the slides are not anything major. They're slides that I used at a 2GX conference, but I updated it to put a big 3 in there, and just to mention some things about Grails 3 specifically, but mostly I'm going to deal with code in all of this. So I will give the slides to Ryan and everything, and we will talk about how to run them and the unit testing and a little bit about integration tests, especially with Spock. And I've got a couple of plugins that I recommend, although I do not know if the plugins have yet been ported to Grails 3. And every plugin in existence has to be slightly rewritten to work under Grails 3. And mostly that's because they changed everything to use Gradle now. So, this is what a lot of people felt was a long overdue change, but it is a radical one. It changes the structure of the application. It changes how things are written. And of course, it changes the whole dependency management section. There's no build.config.groovy anymore. That's all been merged into Gradle.build. build.gradle. And then a lot more changes have been coming along as a ramification of that too. And I've been just running into one little nuisance after another. Oh, I used to be able to do this, but now I have to do it that way, kind of thing. So I'll show you a simple Grails 3 application, and then a somewhat more elaborate one that I spent some of this afternoon playing with JavaScript to get to work better. So I'll take a look at that. One other, do I have it here? Back here, sorry. No, I'm in the right place. Okay, let me give you some one other marketing thing that's going on. I just published, where is it? This is a video course at O'Reilly on Groovy fundamentals. They're going to change the subtitle. I don't know why they put scripts in there and they left out closures, so that's all going to get updated. But this is now published with O'Reilly as a video course there. If you have a Safari account, then this is already on Safari. Otherwise, it's pricey, I guess. But that's the first of 3. The second one will be called Practical Groovy, and that should be out next week sometime. And the third one is called Mastering Groovy, which I'm not sure I feel comfortable with, but whatever. That's going to be out by the end of the month, I would expect. So we'll have all 3 of those ready. So I promised I would say something about those, and that's about all the self-promotion I could stomach. So let me go back here. Now, if I'm looking at, let's see, where's my, oh, here it is. Let's magnify some fonts here. This is the Grails documentation for 3.0, and you can see that The docs all look pretty much the same, except that if I was to go to individual sections of this, you'll notice, by the way, the links now are github.io. It's now a GitHub.io project, interestingly enough. And while everything is pretty much the same as before, there's stuff about static type checking and compilation. But if you took a look at the upgrading from Grails 2 section, then what it basically says is, I'll just summarize, is we give up. Make a new Grails 3 app and copy over your domain classes, your controllers, and then just keep your fingers crossed, because then you're going to have to change things all the way through. Because the changes, while they are relatively simple, are really dramatic. They are significant. Now, let me just build an app right off the bat. So now, of course, IntelliJ IDEA, which is what I like to use and which I'm going to use later, is a really good editor in general for both Groovy and Grails. It doesn't understand Grails 3 at all. It doesn't know the new project structure. It's not familiar with the mechanisms. All my keyboard shortcuts don't work, etc. So what you have to do is to build a regular project from the command prompt and then import it as a Gradle project, because it does understand Gradle. And this will bring in all the dependencies and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to a command prompt here. Hopefully there's nothing incriminating there. So if I go to, let's see, I'll go to my docs folder, and then I have a Grails folder and a Grails apps folder underneath that. And if I say GVM, I use the Groovy Environment Manager when I install Groovy and Grails. Okay, that's readable enough. Okay, so if I say list Grails under GVM, then these are all the versions of Grails that GVM, the Groovy Environment Manager, knows about. The asterisks are the ones I've installed locally. The greater than sign is the one I'm currently using. So I'm currently using 3.0.1. Now that Graham is back at work, as of, I believe, yesterday, nice. Taking his new job at OCI up in St. Louis. I don't know if he's going to move over there or anything. I believe it's all remote at this point. But now that he and Jeff Brown are hard at work at OCI, I expect a 3.0.2 to be coming out imminently. I think there'll be a lot of changes in that at the moment. So now if I say Grails-V, then you see I'm running Grails 3.0.1, which includes Groovy 2.4.3, which is the latest version. So everything in Groovy now is available in Grails. And I'm currently running under Java 8. Now, I don't have anything that I'm doing that requires Java 8. I just happen to be using that for my regular JDK and trying to make the transition to functional programming and everything. And there's just a demonstration that that's what I'm currently using. Now, if I say let's make a new app, just doing the normal create app mechanism, which I'll just call hello, and let me give it a suffix, so I'll call it Austin. Sounds like I'm talking to Austin Powers, but at any rate, now notice how quickly that happened. See, that's going to be the big difference that you're going to experience in favor of Grails 3. The Gradle builds are warp speed. I mean, all of the code generation stuff happens so fast, it's like you hit an enter key and it's done. It's amazingly quick. Now that's some of the good news. And then you'll see that it looks like I have my normal Grails structure, but except that I don't have, like, for example, in the root of a Grails app, I expect to see application.properties, and I don't see that anymore. I see a build.gradle file and a gradle.properties file, and they've generated the Gradle W wrapper scripts so that if you want to give the app to somebody, they don't even have to have Gradle installed. They could just run Gradle W, and it'll download all the dependencies and everything. If I do a tree structure here, then you'll see there's the Gradle wrapper stuff. But here, while there's a Grails app folder, there's an assets folder here where they've got the images, the JavaScript, and the style sheets folders inside it. That's using the asset pipeline plugin, which has become very popular in Grails 2.3 and 4, really. Very dominant. So that's definitely part of it. The comp folder now has, believe it or not, YAML in it. YAML, which you know what YAML stands for, right? Somebody does.
Yet another markup language.
Exactly, yeah, yet another markup language, which I'd never heard of until I read about Ruby on Rails back in 2005. They were very fond of it. I'm a little surprised that it's here. The reasoning that I've heard is that it's very easy to generate YAML files, whereas other configuration takes a bit more work. You still can use config files written in Groovy Builder syntax. So that still works, but the stuff they generated is in YAML now. They start off with a controller for URL mappings and domain and everything. There's our resource bundle. Now there's an init folder, and that's where the bootstrap is. So they move the bootstrap down inside an init folder. There is no build config anymore. Build There you go. How about that? Is it still sharing the screen? Because I don't see anything. Okay, I'll take your word for it. Okay, so if I run create domain class, this time, let's put it in a package. So is there an abbreviation for the Austin Groovy and Grails user group, or what do you use? Pardon me? GGUG? Yeah, and then what about the Griffin people and all that? Yeah, so, right. Yeah, does they matter, right? So the app I'm going to show you once I build it is the same app that I use in a lot of my training classes and stuff. It's called the Quest for the Holy Grails. And yeah, I do apologize, but if it gets you to watch the movie again, how could that be a bad thing, right? You know, Monty Python, the Holy Grail, and I've got a lot of that in there. So let me start with a class called Quest. Now, you remember, when you normally do create domain class from the command line, then you wait, right? It has to fire up the JVM and do everything. There, see? That's what I mean by a speed difference. It built the Quest and the Quest spec basically. What happened this time?
I just need to share your screen again.
I thought that was the case.
They
Okay.
can see you.
But they can see me.
I
They
guess
don't
they
want to see
the
me.
code more than you.
Yeah, well, I certainly would. Should I give them the joke about, just remember, if you're looking at me, the camera adds 10 pounds and there's at least 3 cameras on me, something like that, you know. Yeah, okay, see if that flies. Did that work, by the way?
I still see you.
Still see me. All right, one more time. It says I'm screen sharing. I mean, it's down here. It just be lag. Okay, then let me know if it doesn't work. Okay, so let me go back to IntelliJ here, and let me close this guy. And now you'll see under my domain model, here is my Quest class. How's that font? Not bad? Yeah, and then if I put in a string name and all the normal things that say, oh, by the way, the name can't be blank, you know, that sort of thing. And then comes the first major thing that's going to throw people who are used to Grails and are trying to do the same things they've always done. Now I want to go, oh, well, let's just create a dynamic scaffolding on it, right? I'll just make a scaffolded controller just to do that. Yeah, exactly. Without putting anything in the documentation. Yes, that's gone. No more dynamic scaffolding. I think this was a seriously questionable move. I mean, not just as a bad idea in general, but it's going to make it much harder for newcomers to get into the framework. And you know, when you're competing with 100 other frameworks out there, I don't think that's a good thing to do. Also, all the books and all the documentation expect you to start with a dynamic scaffolding. Now, the reasoning apparently was the claim that the dynamic scaffolding is a source of incredible performance problems. It's very, very slow in general. And my attitude was, well, then just say that. You know, just tell people, don't do this in production. Come on, you know. But, you know, well, at any rate. So what they will do, however, is the following, is that if I want to generate a controller now, then I'll just do my normal generate all. And if I look at my hit tab again, there's my domain class. Again, you see how fast the template did the generation for the controller spec, and all of the views. And my big criticism of this was going to be, well, yeah, but every time I add another property, I'm going to wind up with a problem. I'm going to have to regenerate all these files, and it's going to complain about how you've already got the files in existence, and is it okay to overwrite them? And you try to say, oh, and it doesn't work. You have to say, yes, yes, yes. It'd just really be annoying, you know, or have to remember to change them. But here's how they got around that. So if I actually look, first of all, I've got now. This is the complete scaffolded controller, and you see it looks very much like Grails 2.3 and 2.4 controllers. So if you used any of those, this stuff is basically the same. The show with the domain object, and now we've got at transactionals where they don't really belong, you know, but that's a different question. At any rate, save and edit and update. And then down at the bottom, they've got the not found method. So that's all the same. But now what about the GSPs? And if I look at the view section here, well, let me do it this way. Index.gsp under Grails is the one I want. You see something that IntelliJ doesn't recognize, but we're able to use. That's the Fields plugin. It's a plugin that exists for Grails now, which is pretty good. You know, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. Well, they built that into the scaffolding. And the beauty of this is that that will build a table out of your quest list with regardless of what the actual attributes of the quest are. So also, you know how it used to be when you wanted to fill in a form, they had an underscore form template, GSP template. Well, that's gone too. But if I look at, say, the create GSP, then what you'll see here is that now they're using the all tag from the Fields plugin on the Quest Bean, and that will generate a form for you based on all of this.
So if you like change this view, and then you make a new domain object and do another generate all, it won't override what you've done?
It will if you do a generate all again. The point is you don't have to do a generate all again. If you
do it for that next domain, like how would you generate its views?
for the next, I am going to do generate all, okay, for every domain class that you want to view for. I mean, you don't always have to do it, but exactly. So I do expect to do a generate all. What they're saving us is that if you then add new attributes to an existing domain class that you've already generated the views for, you don't have to regenerate them. That's the idea. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look as good as it did before, but it was the scaffolding. But again, I guess they don't really want to encourage you to use the scaffolding more than absolutely necessary anyway.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So does the fields, these fields also
Yes, right. So the validation still works. In fact, now, if I try to run this app, and I should be able to run it. So if I just do now this run app, again, this is a flaw in the documentation. When you do run app, now it's going to start the underlying Spring Boot, because this is delegating to boot run, if you've ever seen that under Spring. And what will happen is you'll get to 83% done, and you'll sit here, and eventually it's going to say, oh, okay, the app is ready. See, and it, by the way, they took out the context root. It used to be the project name was the context root. Now it's localhost 8080. You'd have to change it inside the YAML file to give it a context root. So if I go to this location here, but actually before I go there, notice we're still sitting on boot run. In other words, I've lost my console. I can't do any more interaction at that console while I'm running. I'd have to open another one, which is disappointing, and it's wrong in the documentation. The documentation says you should come back. And
There's a bug for that, right?
I don't know. Has there been a bug filed for
I
that?
think so. I mean, I have ran into the exact same problem. I was like, what is it doing?
Yeah, it's just sitting there.
I think it was marked like major, like should be next release or something like that.
I sure hope so, because that's really annoying. Rob, you said something too?
What's the YAML setting to set the context?
I don't know offhand.
I mean, because I got into some tweets back and forth with Graham.
Yeah.
Where he said, "Oh yeah, you just set it in YAML."
Right.
And the last two was okay. But what is the setting?
Yeah.
If you look at the Spring Boot documentation, it's the same way you set it in Spring Boot. There's document. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there is. If you look at Spring Boot's documentation, it's the same way.
Okay.
Because it's underlying.
So whatever Spring Boot does, that's what it does. I haven't tried it myself yet, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay, so at any rate, if I go back, actually I didn't want to do that. I want to go to localhost 8080, and you can see there is my controller here. Let me make this a bit bigger. You do see that it does point out the Grails version, the Groovy version, the JVM version, and all the plugins now have a version number that matches the Grails version. I think they do that in 2.4 as well. Before they used to be different. Now, if I mouse over this, it's going to go to quest/index. And of course, I don't have any quests. But if I say new quest and I try to do a create, now, of course, I get my HTML5 of I'm not submitting an empty field. That's an HTML5 validation required inside the input text. So if I put a couple spaces in and click create, and now again, this happens in Grails 2.4 and 2.3, they trim anything that's white space and say it can't be null, and they wind up submitting a null, which isn't really what I wanted. You know what I mean? I wanted to test, say, a blank constraint or something like that, and instead I wind up with a nullable. Now that can be turned off in the settings, again, you could say, oh no, I don't want you to do that trim. And I know how to do it under 2.4. I'm not exactly sure how to do it under 3.0. I mean, I don't remember the setting offhand, but it's in the documentation. That is at least well documented there. So when I have more classes, I'll show you a validation failure, but it is doing validation, was my point. So it is there. If I tried to put in actually something, I can go seek the Grail, and it all seems to work just fine, and so on. All right, now with that in mind, I want to now switch over to my full one, the one where I've already written all the domain classes and the controllers and everything, so that I could show you a little bit more detail. So let me close this, and I'll just, again, I don't know any alternative other than Control-C out of it at the moment. But it does bring me back to the Grails command prompt and not all the way to my root, interestingly enough. See, it stopped the build and stopped the application, and I'm back to the Grails prompt, and I could do other Grails commands if I wanted to. Now, by the way, if you wanted to do a test app, let me show you here that if I go back to my IntelliJ, I showed you the controller. Oh, other way. And there's also a test for the controller. Of course, it doesn't think there is. Yeah, this is part of the problem with IntelliJ not understanding the new structure of the Grails apps. It thinks there isn't one, when in fact it's hiding under, where's my source folder? Where's my test folder? Oh, there it is, source. Again, my eye goes to the wrong place now. But at any rate, here is the Quest spec, which does nothing. See, extend specification, setup, cleanup, test something, expect, fix me, true equals false. That's generally going to fail for most values of false. You know. But here, notice this is the controller spec. So they've got the thing that I normally want to start with for people who are already familiar with Grails is the test for annotation. So the test for annotation triggers the mixin, the domain class mixin that they use now, or testing mixin. And then they have a mock annotation as well that will add all of the GORM methods to the domain class. So the idea here is that they want to make a test for the Quest controller, but most of the Quest controller methods like save or update or whatever involve using the domain class and calling things like validate or save or doing finders and stuff like that. There's certainly get methods in there. Well, the mock annotation on a domain class will be like you ran mock domain on it. That'll add in all the GORM methods. And then the test for, not only does it tell the testing structure that we're testing a controller, it also will instantiate the controller and add a field called controller to your application. Now, this actually is true of Grails 2.3 and above. This has been around a while. So again, they're Spock tests. Then they say populate valid parameters, but here, void test the index action returns the correct model. When the index action is executed, see, there's that controller field, and they invoke index, then the model is correct, and that their quest list on the model is not null, and the count is 0. Likewise, if we do a create, we get back a model. If you do a save, then we get back the form content type. It's a post method. Then we instantiate a quest. It added the validate method again. That came from the mock annotation. And then we can invoke save on it, and it will be successful. When we do this, then the quest isn't null, and we're going to the create view. Then we reset it and populate the valid parameters. See, the problem is that this quest, this will not be null, but of course that's not valid if there's any nulls in it or anything. So we're going to then populate it, instantiate it, and now I should be redirected to the show action. And you can basically see how the scaffolding works by following this controller mechanism here. Okay, they have various things here to show 404s and domain instances passed to the edit, and test the update performs an update on a valid domain instance and an invalid domain instance. And there's your redirected URL and deletes, and on and on and on all the way through. So anytime you generate the complete scaffolding with a generate all, you're going to get a test that looks very much like this. Now, since I want this test to pass, let me show it fail first, right? They say never trust a test you haven't seen fail. So I only want to do the unit test at the moment. So I'll run my test app at the command prompt. And then there's
there's supposed to be an open command with test report that works under Grails 2.3, and I tried under 3.0, and it doesn't give it to me in the tab completion, but I'll try it again. Now, you see, there's all those failures because I didn't populate valid parameters, but I'm supposed to now be able to do open, and then if I hit there, nothing's happening. So if I say test report, let's see if it worked. Okay, it did work, even though the scaffolding didn't show it exists. And there's your normal test report showing all these things that failed in general. So what I will do is, let me move this to a window so I can get it back. And then let me fix the test here. And to populate with a valid parameter, all I'll do is I'll say params.name equals seek the Grail. And now that that's already saved in IntelliJ, I can run the test app again, and it should be much faster the second time. Caches a lot of things. Doesn't seem to be that much faster, but at any rate. And now when I go back to my browser view here and refresh, then the one that failed was that I didn't put anything in the quest spec, in that test. I left that one alone, and therefore that one failed, but the others are still okay. The quest controller spec, all of those things did exactly what they were supposed to. Okay, so there's your very basics of testing Grails. If I wanted to test the spec, the other one, I could put in something like this. Now, first of all, I don't need this is another big change. If I wanted to test a domain class in Grails before, I always wrapped it in a mock for constraint tests. The method called mock for constraints test, because that method adds a validate method to the domain model, which when executed will go ahead and check it against the constraints. And if they fail, add an errors object that I could then interrogate and everything. Well, it turns out now you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to say anything. In fact, what I'll do is I'll say something like blank name should fail. And what I'll do is, instead of doing an expect, let me do a when and a then. So I'll say when quest queue is a new quest with a name of just empty space here. Let's put some spaces in just to prove a point. Then what I should get is not queue.validate. That should fail. And then I want to show what the error code is as well. But let me at least run this just to show you that this much should work. So I'll run my tests again. I could put in as an argument the actual class, and then it would only run that one. But again, the console doesn't seem to understand some of these things, and it makes it a little harder to do. Actually, I could probably do that one. So if I go back to here and refresh now, let me go back to this level. Now the quest spec is passing. See, it all looks fine. So that's the way it should be, right? I mean, that's working just fine. Now, the interesting thing, another thing that has changed, is that what I used to write after this is I also knew that this was a blank error, that I could say q.errors.name was in fact the key in the errors map. Name was the key in the errors map, and the constraint that was being violated was the blank constraint. And then I'd run this, and it would return true. And unfortunately, that no longer works. So when I run the test, and maybe I can put in my, no, I'm going to have to do it deliberately. I mean, I used to be able to do it with a tab completion, but at least this ought to work anyway. Both work. Yeah. Oh, and that failed. That figures. All right, let's take a look. Refresh. And it now says, oh, yeah, no, exactly. I knew that was going to work, or not going to work. It says no such property name. And this kind of bothers me because this errors map is a map. You know what I mean? And that's legitimate map syntax in Groovy. But now you have to do this. You have to actually put in the property name like this. And oh, by the way, this isn't the right error anymore either. Okay, which really surprised me. So again, I'll demonstrate. Let's go over here and I'll show it again. So if I run that again, yeah, a unit colon would work just as well as -- unit, either way. What I don't want to do is do test app, because the problem is one of the tests that built into there was the functional test, was the JEB test, and that takes time. even though it doesn't actually seem to animate the browser. So what you find out is that the actual error says, no, wait a minute, that's field error in object on name, blah, blah, blah. And on the other side, that's wrong. So it turns out what you put in is dot code. And let me just save us a moment. I think it's blank. You know, I don't remember offhand, so let me find out. So I'll just find out by running it again. And then you'll see that now I have to actually put in a slightly different output code as well to see the results here. And it turns out it's, it's a nullable error. Right, I wound up with a null because I put in something there. So that didn't show what I wanted to show, but it's something I can at least put in and have everything pass at this point. And then when I go to my regular already worked out code, I'll show you the actual error now. Not that I've seen. Yeah, and Gradle does better than that in general. You know what I mean? I mean, Gradle should be able to do that, and yet I haven't seen it. So now we're all set. I don't remember what the flag is. No, I see there was a, now in just regular Gradle builds, you get the actual output of what the test was. So I don't remember what the special case was. It could be -- info or verbose or what have you. I don't know specifically, but yeah, that's kind of annoying, isn't it? You know. All right, now let me go and change to one that I already have written so I can save myself some time here. So let me get out of this. And I'll go here and I will stop the server. Oh, I stopped it already. So I can close all this and I'll close this project. And here's the one that I've already written. And I called it hello because I was just going to do a hello world one under Grails 3. But I wound up just adding everything to it. So what this had was a nice little welcome controller that basically just says, grab the name and say hello world here. And then the test for this guy, again, I'd love to go over to test and have it go to it. No, but you see, it wants to generate it. It doesn't understand the new project structure. So a lot of the things I'm accustomed to doing in here don't work. But I think I can do, it's Command O for welcome controller spec there. I can shift over to it, and you see there's the test for the controller. And when I call index with no arguments, then I can check the response text. And this is one of the things I wanted to mention to those of you who haven't played with it much, is that this has been around in Grails for a while. They have an instance of Grails mock HTTP servlet response. This is an extension of Spring's mock HTTP servlet response class. And I'm invoking the getText method. So if I have a controller that does a render, see this is a render here, then I can call getText on it and get back whatever I was looking for. Here, this is both without a name and by specifying name as a parameter and calling index. That works as well. So I'm able to do that both ways. The other thing it has is a redirected URL property, so that if you wanted to do a redirect in a controller, you can test that. And if you wanted to do an action that returns a map, what you do in that case is invoke the method and save it as an object, pardon me, as a map, and then you could just check the keys and values. And that works just fine, okay? So that's the trivial one. Let me show you something a bit more involved. Now what I'd like to do, it might be even easier to follow if I run this first. So let me go up to hello 301, and I'll do it. Again, I'll prefer to do it from the command prompt here. Myself screen space. And this one's got a massive domain model. I think I've got 4 classes, you know. So see if you can wrap your head around that. And it also has a service in there with a geocoder. And see, I've got quests and tasks, and then knights and castles. And the castles are just named locations. So if I go to this, let me show you what I have. There are all my individual controllers. I also added the console plugin, which I really like, by the way. That's one of the few that's already been upgraded, I guess you'd say. And the nice thing about that is that you can run a Grails console in a browser window and then do like GORM-related tests like dynamic finders or criteria queries or where queries, and just experiment with them until you get what you want. I'll show you that later. So if I look at my quest here, then here's my Seek the Grail. And see, this is what happens with the Fields plugin. My quest has nights and tasks. And the tasks, by the way, are a cascade delete. They're a belongs to. So it has many tasks. Tasks belong to a quest. But the nights are not a belongs to here. But this is what the Fields plugin shows. Now, this one is just a demonstration. I haven't put in a toString method in my task class, but I did put in a toString method in my nights. If I, normally I would be able to click on this, but I can't. So if I go into it now, unfortunately, it doesn't show them at all. And that's what you get from the Fields plugin with the scaffolding. You're going to have to write your own views again. So if I go back home here and say, well, let me look at the tasks. Here are the various tasks. You see they've got the quest in there. Run away from the killer rabbit and all that kind of stuff. And I can go down to an individual piece. And again, the association is not really followed at all in the Fields plugin. I also have nights. And nights have a title and a name. And then they optionally have quests and castles. There's King Arthur and Lancelot and Sir Robin, who bravely ran away. Very bravely ran away. And then this is the one that's supposed to get the oohs and ahs. Let me make this a little bit bigger. If I go to the castle controller here, then what I actually have is a plugin that's going to, actually I didn't use a plugin for this. I wrote the freaking JavaScript. That's what I'm trying to debug, figure out what did I do wrong, what did I do wrong. And I've got my castles in there, and there's, of course, I have Camelot in Austin, and this would be Swamp Castle down here in San Diego. I figured that would go over okay. See, I come from Connecticut, so an illegal state exception is New York, for me. For you, I assume it's probably Oklahoma or something like that, Anybody from Oklahoma? I was in a hotel bar in Ottawa, Canada. I mean, Ottawa. Everybody's nice in Canada, right? And I'm up there and I'm having dinner, and there's these two guys sitting over having a conversation. And one guy says, yeah, my son just moved to Oklahoma. The other guy goes, Oklahoma? Do you know why Texas doesn't fall into the Gulf? Why? Because Oklahoma sucks. It's like, oh my God. I mean, I'm sitting in Ottawa, Canada. I'm like, what the? I almost burst out laughing. I had to go, oh, geez, because I know some people from Oklahoma. They're very nice. Yeah. I don't know, But at any rate, yeah, exactly. I figure at least I got a story out of it, right? But at any rate, so there's my castles, and I have my geocoder built in, which I'll show you, which computes the latitude and longitude using Google's geocoding service. And then I used Google Maps, or Google Chart has a map API that allows you to build Google Maps by providing latitudes and longitudes. And my castles already have latitudes and longitudes, but by supplying this, I'm able to generate a Google map inside my app, And in Grails 2.2 and now 2.3 and 4, I use the Google Visualization plugin for this and have the plugin generate the JavaScript for me. Now I just wrote the JavaScript because I don't know when they'll manage to update that plugin. That doesn't seem to be a really, really high priority. And I'll show you that later if you're interested. But I want to look at some of the tests now because I've got some interesting stuff in there. So you got a feel for the domain model now? Nothing complicated. By the way, other things you can always do in a Grails app now is that if I go to localhost, if I go to DB console now, then I can actually access the database. I think I am using an H2 driver in memory, the dev DB. I've never had a test of an H2 one fail, so I don't know if that'll work or not. But you see, then I can see my castle in there, and I've got my nice little database. This has been in Grails since 2.3 or 2.2 even. Built right in now. It's a beautiful hole in your production system, wouldn't you say? Yeah. Exactly. It's only available in development mode, but there's a setting that you can turn on that will open it up in production. They actually say a warning, just don't do this unless you're behind a trusted security framework, or if you want job security, but one or the other, But nice that you can do this. And you could run arbitrary SQL from here. I could do, delete from whatever, whatever you like.
Yes.
Yes, I've done it with, the only ones I've tested out with, I did it with MySQL, and I have run it with Oracle, although I didn't try to do any changes. I just did the read. But yeah, this is your poor developer's GUI for your database. And this is built right in. Now, if I break out of that, the other thing I added, as I mentioned, was that console plugin. time. Okay, and then I'll turn on the screen share and share the entire screen. And I mean, yesterday my problem was I couldn't fix that IntelliJ problem. Today my problem is I hit the freaking power button when I meant to hit delete. You know? Yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line. Okay, so coming back here, let me show you some of the actual model, and then I'll show you some of the tests built into this thing. Oh, incidentally, here's the YAML file. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the top of it, and I didn't do a good job. So again, this can all be done in Groovy using the normal builder syntax if you like. But here we're using the web profile. Grails now has several available profiles which are horribly documented, if at all. I used the web micro profile, and it built just one little class and a YAML file and an application. I mean, I could run it as a Java app, and it's wonderful, except I have no idea what to do from there. You know what I mean? There's no documentation whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, but it was like, wow, a Grails app consisting of 2 classes. You know, this is phenomenal, and yet I just need more information.
It's truly a microservice.
It really is. It's a micro service, yes. Would that be a Pico service potentially, or femto services and all that? Anyway, there's my default package for my application here. You can put in the info, the app name version, and Grails version. These are pulling the values out of the other files, but I assume we could probably edit that. And then in Grails, this is the stuff that was always inside of config.groovy. The MIME types, all the different MIME types being listed, controllers default scope is a singleton, using Spring. More problems? Was that out of the way? Oh, you're doing me a favor, dude. I should not call attention to it. Views, there's your default codec. Have you noticed in earlier versions of Grails, the default codec is none? In other words, they don't encrypt they don't encode anything. And now they really want to encode it in HTML. The Fields plugin makes a big deal out of that. That's to try to prevent the nice SQL injection problems, or more likely, I guess that's cross-site scripting. But either way. So there's the default codec, and in the GSPs, you've got an encoding and an HTML codec, etc. Enable reloading on the GSPs. There's your data source. So you see that the data source stuff, there's no data source.groovy either. And that's all made its way into the YAML file here. So it's pooled with H2 and SA, and then there's your various environments. Same as what you've seen before, and that's the end of the file. So now you've got a totally separate configuration. Now, one of the things they're going to play up about Grails, this is not testing, but one of the things they're going to play up about it is inside the init folder is that there's a class called application extends Grails auto config, and it's got a main method in it. And the idea is that from the command line, you could run your Grails app using this, using Java, for example. You could execute this as a Java app, which is one of the things that Spring Boot plays up. Now, in practice, what they mean is when you do the build, it's going to make a jar file, and then you could run the jar file as an executable jar. So you can say Java space -jar and give it the path to the constructed jar file, and therefore it'll start up as a single app. I'm trying to, self-contained, I think is the word I was looking for, as a self-contained application. I don't know if anybody's going to use that feature, but it does work, and it is built into Grails now. I don't know if it does that. I think it probably does, which
It does.
Yeah.
If you wanted to package an RPM or a dev file or something, that would be. And you can also, I think you can pick between Jetty and Tomcat as in there is.
Yeah, it pretty much replaces that whole standalone plugin that used to be in Rails.
Oh, right, the standalone. Yeah, exactly.
It's all built in now. So
Right. But if you can still do the war task and get a war file that doesn't have Tomcat embedded in that you could drop into. I mean, all the normal stuff still works, but now you have this extra mechanism. And I have run it. I'm not convinced it's a better way to go. You know what I mean? Than making a war file and deploying it under a server and all of that. Your mileage may vary. If you find a good reason for it, let me know. I'm not sure. Well, they do say that, but and in fact, what's supposed to happen is right here in this app. Remember, this guy doesn't understand Grails at all anymore. It's like I'm using the community edition practically. In principle, I could right-click on this and say run as, run a job application, and it would start up. I have had mixed behavior with it. It seems to work, but I'm not sure it does the reloading properly. You know what I mean? If I edit something, I'm going to have to shut it down and start it up
Yeah, I think
again.
that's for like a deployment kind of situation.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I want to deploy this out and I don't want the complication.
Right. So the fact that I could start it up inside IntelliJ is not a great selling point for me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
not really.
So, okay, so much for that. Now, looking at the actual domain classes here, here's my quest class. And my quest class, has a name, and there's my toString method, and has many with both nights and tasks. And my constraints is that the name can't be blank. Here is the task class. And, oh, see, I did put in a toString annotation. Oh, is that really another thing that didn't work? I mean, that works in earlier versions of Grails. Is that when I look at the toString, version of task, I should just get the name and the priority. I did put in some constants here for min and max. I have a name, a priority that starts at 3, and then start and end date are new dates and a Boolean. Let me skip the rest here for a moment. There's my constraint on name. My priority is in a range constraint. I don't have a constraint on start date or completed. You know what? I don't need them anymore. I used to do this. Actually, I probably do need it. The reason I would put in a property in the constraints block that I'm not constraining is only when I was using the scaffolding, because the scaffolding will put things in the order that they appear in this block, as opposed to, say, alphabetical or whatever order you have them in your system. So I wanted them in this order. Now, of course, I've already generated my views. I could take them out now, but I'd have to go and edit the views myself to fix them. That's okay. I wanted to pull up the properties. What I don't care about, oh, you're saying it'll pull them up and therefore pull them up dynamically, and it might change the ordering. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to try it out. I put in a custom validator here for end date just to show. Again, I'm trying to show students how a 2-argument validator works, and this is basically saying submit the value, and here's a reference to the current task, and the value of the end date has to be greater than or equal to the start date. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. Now, the task belongs to a quest. I also put in a transient property called duration. The duration of the task is the end date minus the start date plus 1, and I marked it as transients, so it's not saved in the database, for example. And then here is my night class. Nights have a title and a name, and they have a quest and a castle as an association, but not as a belongs to or anything like that. And I even made those 2 associations nullable so that a night could be between quests or between castles. Let us not go to Camelot. It is a silly place. That sort of thing. There's my in-list constraint for the title, Lord and Lady, King, Queen. I don't know what the corresponding one for Sir was, so I just went with that. There's that. And then finally, here's the castle. And the castle has name, city, state, latitude, and longitude. Now, city and state are very nebulous concepts when it comes to the Google geocoder. They just want an address that they can go look up, and it could be anywhere in the world. So I called them city and state, but it could be anywhere. There's my toString method. I went back and forth on this. This is basically saying, Windsor Castle or White Castle. That one works, but Castle Black would be the other way, right? Which way is the right way to do this? I didn't put any logic in or anything. Castles have many knights, but knights have a reference to a castle. And there's my normal constraints. I don't have a constraint on longitude. I could always subtract 360s and that'd be all right. But the latitude, well, it's South Pole to North Pole, This is also a demonstration that if the data type here is double rather than big decimal, then the constraint also has to be a double. That's been a Grails requirement for years. That the data type of the constraint must match the data type of the field. And even though 90 would be promoted to a double, it doesn't matter. You have to specifically call it with a D on it, or a G for big decimal, or whatever you have there. So there's that. And now, if I look at the tests, first I'll just look at the tests for the individual ones, but I want to show you some really interesting stuff. So first, here's the quest one. This is as simple as they get. There's my castle, or my quest rather. The sample one, I'm calling this the sample, is valid. I can call validate and it works. Notice the absence of the mock for constraints test method. I always had to put that in a setup block, and now that's gone. It must be added automatically during testing. I didn't find anything in the documentation to tell me, but it's works. And then here, when I put in a blank name, see, this is what I was looking for before. If I look for the errors under name and I get the code, then it turns out to be blank, and that works. So now I have to ask for the code in this syntax here. So that's very straightforward. And the task one is the same mechanism with just a little bit more detail. So here we have a task spec, for example, that makes a task with a name and a quest, and all the other properties default to valid properties, not nulls and priorities of 3 and everything. So I check the duration. That's not a validation constraint. That's just checking the business logic in my get duration method. So the default duration should be 1. If I add 1 to the start date, the duration should be 2. Nice and simple. Then my sample is valid. If I do a blank name, it's the same error as before. If I put in a priority too low, then it's not valid. And then if I go to the code, it turns out to be a range.too_small error. Just like if I go too high, it's a range.too_big error now.
So do you have to fail to get the value?
Do I have what?
You have to actually fail to get the value, to get those.
I did. I couldn't find them in the docs anywhere. So I actually failed on purpose just to see what the right value was. Because you would think it would be in there. But I mean, normally you go into the constraint and it does tell you the error code. But it doesn't. Oh, you know what? I'll bet it's in the I18N file. I'll bet I could have found it there all along. I didn't even think about it. Here's my I18N. Yep. I'll bet that's it, you know? And I bet I just didn't think about it. Does it say? Yeah, I want a range one. So range. I don't see it. Invalid range. Property 0, class 1 with valid does not fall within the valid range from 3 to 4. No, I still don't see it. Yeah, those are the only ones where it appears. All right, it was an idea. But the way I did it, again, is I just failed to see it. I don't know, failed in order to find out what it was. I haven't gone asking on the mailing list or anything yet. Now, what's nice is that you can do a Spock unroll. So here's an unroll where, just to prove a point, I'm going to do all the valid priorities. You know, I mean, I know what too low is. I know what too high is. So here I'm saying expect with a name and a quest. And here's this priority P here. And I'm going to call validate where. And I'm going to use my left shift operator from Spock to say take all the priorities between min and max and feed them in one by one. And I'll get each expect will run. And I'll see this in the output. And I'll show you this in a minute. I mean, it does work. The hard part of this, by the way, was realizing I needed to put the range in parentheses in order to get it to evaluate. Because if you don't put in the parentheses, it tries to feed the whole range into P, and that fails. So you have to put it in parentheses in order for it to evaluate it in general. And then, of course, this is just the standard validator for the custom validator. That turned out to be a validator.invalid error. So with the addition of the interesting Spock unroll, that's all I'm seeing as something new that you may not have run into before here. Now, just to open up the error page here, wait a minute, do I have oh, I'm in the middle of running it. So, all right, I'll stop the run for the moment. I can always start it up again. And then I'll open up the test report so I can show you that. Come on, you can do it. Open test report. And here are all of them that I'm going to show you. And the one I just showed, I showed the quest one, blank name's not valid, and the sample is valid. And the task one, you see, here's the unroll set. There's all the individual priorities that I put inside the names there. So you can't, they don't show up as anything any different, but at least I get an individual output for each of the tests now. Okay. Now, going back, that was the task and the quest. Here is the spec for the night. And this is a Spock data table. But it's got a nice little feature in it that a lot of people are not aware of. So first of all, the plan is remember, title is in a particular list and name can't be blank. So I also put in a column called valid, and down here at the bottom I've defined a variable called result that uses just a ternary operator to say, is it valid? Then I want the string valid, otherwise I want the string not valid, and that's being plugged into the output. See, that'll show up in the test report. Otherwise, what you would see if I plugged in hash valid in there, I would just see true and false. And this is a nice little technique to customize the output based on your individual test case values in there. So this is kind of a sweet mechanism. So here what I did is I made a series of nights, some which are valid. I put in Edward Stark, of course, and that would work. And Pope, well, that's not going to work. And a sir with an empty name, sir not appearing in this film, that would work actually, unfortunately. But so I just put in blank state. And you see that in this case, if I go back to my output report here, if I go to my night spec, those are again all listed individually, and I just wrote them in the data table format. So every one in the data table winds up being used. And again, the syntax is the column header is the variable. And in the expect block, I'm using the column headers for my test. And then I also use these fields inside the output report here. And using the unroll annotation means I will get one output line per test in the data table. So if you haven't seen Spock data table tests, then that may be new to you. Most people at this point have at least seen a data table test. This is a very convenient one that works in Grails. Okay? So now the other one that's kind of cool is the Castle spec. And I'll have to explain this. So now this was something I saw from Paul King when he was doing a talk once. Here's the Groovy console. And let me make that a little bigger. I probably didn't do it. What is it? Shift Command L. I thought I hit that. At any rate, so if I said, for example, a list of lists, so I have 1, 4, and 7, and I put in here quote A and quote B, then there's a neat little method in the Groovy JDK called combinations. And you see what I get? It's all combinations of the first with the second. How nice is that? And I had not even realized that method was there. And Paul King did it in a talk once. And I went, wow. And he said, yeah, it's great for testing, you know, so that I can test good and bad in all the different categories I might have. By the way, I could add in extras, X and Y and Z, for example. And then you get all the combinations of the first with the second with the third, which is pretty darn powerful. Isn't that nice? So what I did here in my test is that I have my castle here. That's a little bit too big here. How's that? Does that work for you? Okay. So what I have is a single test, seemingly a single test. Notice I've got the unroll. I'm going to put in name, city, state, lat, long is result. And then down here, I'm putting in my expect where I just create the castle and call validate equals valid. Where, and here's name, city, state, lat, and long. There's my left shift operator. So I put in name that's not blank and name that is blank, and city that's both blank and not blank, and state that's blank and not blank. And then for latitude, remember I can go from -90 to 90. So I went just outside of that, and then the boundaries and one in the middle and just outside greater. And then for longitude, I don't have a constraint on it, but rather than leave it out entirely or put in a default up here, I just put the default down here as a single value. That's not going to add anything to my test. You know, and I say dot combinations. So it will generate all of those, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 1, 2, 4, 5 times 1. So 5 times 8, 40 different tests right in there. In a nice way to do it. Now, how do I get what valid is? Now, in a data table, I could actually put whether it's valid, true, or false right in the table. In this case, I did something that feels kind of kludgy. I actually put my business logic, my validation logic in the test. So see if I trim did I lose the connection again? Let me just check real quick. Okay, well, the screen went blank, so hopefully it's all right. Anyway, if I trim the name and the city and the state and the latitude conditions and all those are true, then that's valid. Otherwise, it's not valid. So I built that in. And the result, when I run this, wrong one, sorry, is that if I go back to my castle spec now, is that I actually have 40 different tests. And the only thing I might do is put business logic to not show nulls like this. But at least I could see that all of them passed all the way through. Yeah, I mean, that's got to be useful, right? And that was all, I give Paul King all the credit for that because he's just pointed out this combinations method. And once I knew that, I thought, oh, hey, I've got an idea. I could use this, you know? So there's the result. Now, the other thing I did here is not necessary in IntelliJ, but it might make Eclipse happy if you're ever stuck using Eclipse for something Groovy or Grails related. It's that, in general, these variables that are being defined inside a Spock test are not declared with data types. And your IDE is a lot happier if it knows what the data types are. If you want to specify the data types, you do it as arguments to the test. This does not change the test in any way. It's really just documentation for the reader to know what these variables are, and it also helps the IDE know what they are. So I threw them in there just to show you can, but it didn't change anything, basically, in what's going on. Okay, sound good? All right, so those are all the domain classes that I'm checking. Now, for the actual controllers, I don't have anything fancy except for one thing. Now, let me show you my service, and then I'll show you the castle controller. See, the other controllers are all basic, just generated scaffolded controllers, you know? So the stuff I was showing you before with that Quest controller, you know, create and save and update and edit, those all the same stuff here. But let me open up my service, which is my geocoder service, and I'll show you the test for that. So the service, I call this, there's the base URL for the Google geocoder, and I take a castle, and I've got this fill in lat long method. So I extract the city and state, and I transform it by URL encoding the city and state names. So that if there's any spaces in there, they'll get turned into pluses. If it's an apostrophe, it's got a %27. And then I join them with a comma, and that gives me my encoded address. If you were to look at the documentation for the geocoder, this is what it wants. So my query string is just address equals that mess. So then I use the XML slurpers parse method to go to that location, downloads the XML block, and then parses it, and I drill down to the location and extract the lat and long out of them, convert them to doubles, and update my latitude and longitude. Now, in practice, we're supposed to do, right, test-driven development, TDD, you know, write the test, watch it fail, and then gradually implement it to make them turn green and add more. I'm not great at that. I don't do that all the time. I tend to follow a different practice I call GDD, which stands for guilt-driven development. If I write this much code, I feel guilty. I really need to test that, you know. So that's what I want to show you here. And here is the geocoder service spec. Now I'm using Mountain View, California, because if you look at the geocoder documentation, that's the example they use, but I'm not putting in a street address. So I'm not going to hit the values that they provided exactly. I just want to be within a tenth, for example, just mostly proving that it's not zeros. So I put in a castle in Mountain View, California. Because geocoder service is in the test for, I can invoke service dot and then check the latitudes and longitudes and make sure they're close enough, if you will. Also, as a nice little side point, one of the things that the Grails or the Groovy JDK does, what they call the GDK these days, is it often takes static methods in one class and turns them into instance methods in another. So in practice, you know, normally we would have to write something like math.abs of -3 in order to see that. Well, now I can go -3.abs and, oh, wait a minute, I got -3. Why did I get -3? Do you know?
Negating
Yeah.
the value of the absolute value of 3.
You all got it. It's an order of operations problem. It invoked abs on 3 and then negated it. So instead, let me put this in parentheses. And now the abs method has been added as an instance method to number. But now I'm going to spoil a Groovy puzzler for you because I sent it. Yeah. Oh, this is not the hard part. Here's the part that throws people. You ready? I want to print both of these. I want to see the outputs here. So I'll just put a print line in front of both of them. And hey, I got a null pointer exception. Why did I get a null pointer exception? So if you go to 2GX and you see them do the Groovy puzzlers, you're going to get one right. What happened was printline saw these parentheses and thought it belonged to it. So it printed -3, and then printline returns void. Of course, you can't call .abs on a null, see? So this is one of those cases where you have to put the parentheses back in for it to work. See? We just assumed, oh, printline with one argument, no problem, I'll leave the parens out. And most of the time you're fine, but every once in a while it'll get confused, see? So at any rate, I always thought that was an interesting little demo. And here in my mechanism, I'm not having that problem. In my test, I don't have that issue. But I thought I'd just use the abs method to bring up the conversation of showing that we now have abs in number. So we don't have to use the math class directly in this case. Okay? So that's the geocoder service spec. And now what I want to show you is the, which test did I want to go to? Oh, right. Here's my Castle controller. The Castle controller does dependency injection. So I plug in my service as an attribute of the controller, and then it'll use Spring's dependency injection to plug it in here. And now I use it by going down to the save method, and once I have a castle, I'll fill in the lat long. Remember, this does not behave the way anybody thinks it's going to behave. It used to be in the older versions of Grails, you said save and you gave it an ID, and then it would call get with that ID to go pull it out of the database to see if it was there, for example. Now you provide the domain class, and it will pull the ID out, not in the save method, but in the edit method, the update method. It's going to go do a get, and if it's not found, it'll say it's a problem. Here, look at this. It says you provide a castle if the castle's null. Set rollback only not found. Again, I'm not providing a castle. I'm providing an ID. I'm basically filling out a form and submitting the form. And this thing is going and populating that domain object. It's doing all the binding right here. It made a new castle, filled it in with the parameters, and then tried to see whether it worked or not. You know, I mean, it's just not clear at all what's going on compared to what we saw before. But at any rate, that's what happened. Once it's in there and I get past fill in the lat long, if it has any errors, we go back to the create view. Otherwise, we save it, etc. I didn't change anything else here. I just put the fill in, I'm sorry, I skipped it, the fill in lat long here. I also did it in the update method. Again, it will go and look in the database and find that castle. If it's not found, we're out. Otherwise, fill in the, it's already done the binding. See, it's already updated the city and state. And then I go fill in the lat long and check the validation and flush and everything. So now what I'm getting at, though, is I have modified my controller, and now those old generated controller tests are going to fail. Because the controller tests are assuming that I have a service injected. And if I'm running a unit test, the service won't be injected anymore. That's the problem. I mean, in an integration test, I'd be okay. But in a service test, pardon me, in a unit test, it wouldn't. Now, we also have the dicey definition here. Is it really a unit test if I go offline? You know, if I go to Google and download it, you know, and the answer is, of course, it's not truly a unit test if you do that. But from the Grails point of view, a unit test means that the Grails infrastructure is not involved. No dependency injection, no real database, none of that. Whereas a Grails integration test, the Grails infrastructure is involved. What I did in my Castle controller spec is I said, what am I going to do about that service? So I actually used an expando. And in the expando, I said, hey, let's put in a fill-in lat long method that takes the castle and does nothing. I made the geocoder in this test controller. So I simply need this not to be null. And then I go and say, let's put the geocoder service property of the controller to be that. And the only reason this works is because in the castle controller, I used def for the injection. If I'd put in a data type, castle controller, I would, I'm sorry, I put in geocoder service as a data type, I would have had to play with mocking frameworks. I would have had to use the Spock mocks or some other mechanism. And I've done that before. But if you just stick with def, I actually have here a use case where an expando turns out to be a very simple solution to the problem. And it did. And the rest of this is absolutely the same. I put, well, no, Dallas, so I probably want to say Austin, right, for Camelot. I probably don't need the latitude and longitude, but there it is. And then the rest of this is exactly the way it was before. Okay. Now, the final thing to show you, well, actually, let me show you the output. If I go back to the Castle controller spec, then again, you can't tell I did anything. Those are the same test methods that are in any of the scaffolded controller tests. Okay, it's just that mine worked this time because I used the Expando. It's nice to have an Expando every once in a while, you know, just to prove that they even are used anywhere. The rest of these are the same thing we saw before. So now the other thing I want to show you is that functional test. So let me close all these. Notice that when you first generate a Grails app, integration test under source, and then Groovy, and then there's my package, and it put in my functional spec. And this is how you indicate an integration test now. There's an annotation for it, at integration. So this means dependency injection works. You know, I could plug in services, I could do whatever I want. It extends Jeb spec now, so that you can have Jeb built in. That was one of the dependencies in the Gradle build file. I could do things in setup and cleanup, and this is what it defaulted to. Void test something when the home page is visited. Go to / then the title is correct, and this is syntax from, well, it must be using Jeb. I mean, I remember this is, the first JavaScript library I learned was Prototype. And unfortunately, that seems to have gone away. I never really learned jQuery very well. Does jQuery use a dollar like that? So that's what it is. It's jQuery syntax. Yeah, so they went and found the title, and they pulled in the text, and it says, welcome to Grails. Now, if I run the test as a whole, so I want to demonstrate that now, even though I've already got the output. If I now just say test app, it's going to run the unit tests, and then it's going to run that integration test. Now, I'm accustomed to, you know, Selenium tests, opening up a browser and watching it evolve and everything. That apparently does not happen. I don't actually see anything. It's just we get through all the unit tests, and then it'll say doing integration tests, and then I won't see it. You know, I'll just suddenly it'll be complete. So there it's running all the unit tests, and now I believe it'll switch to the integration tests as well. I didn't pick one. It's using the built-in one.
It uses HTML unit by
Yeah.
default, so if you wanted to use Chrome or Firefox, switch out the driver, and then you would see it over there.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
because I didn't update that driver.
Yeah.
What about WebDriver, or is that WebDriver under the hood?
It's WebDriver.
Okay, so, and I'm not exactly sure what, but you see how this I do see. We switched integration tests, and then it ran the integration tests, and there we go. Now, if I go back to my browser output here, and I refresh this, actually I'll just go to all here. Then for some weird reason, all it shows me is the functional test. I know. And the standard output, yeah, Grails app's running there, exactly what we said. It's like, really, where's all my unit tests? Believe me, if any of them failed, I'd see them. Because I went through that a lot, you know? But right now, all it shows me is this, which I don't understand why. I haven't figured that part out yet. And I don't know Jeb well enough to play around with different pieces of it, okay? So the last thing that I will show you in that app before I leave it entirely is that the JavaScript to do the map on top of it. So what I did is I want to show you that, let me say it this way. Have you played with the REST capabilities in Grails yet? The RESTful Web Services aspects to it? There's something called @resource, which will turn a domain class into a RESTful web service, supporting get, post, put, delete, and a few others as well, automatically. You don't even need a controller to make this happen. It's very, very powerful. Now, it turns out that the scaffolded controllers are now based on those RESTful controllers. You don't see it. I mean, you know, we were just looking at a controller, and I didn't see any of that stuff. You know, if I look at that Castle controller again, then again, you don't see anything here to indicate that this is a RESTful web service, other than maybe the allowed methods make sense for REST. Pardon me? Well, the respond is there to say, yes, for a MIME type, then I will try to accommodate it. But there's nothing to say that it's actually implementing any of that stuff. You know, I mean, it could be I ask for application/JSON, it just goes, I don't know what to do, you know. But it does, you're right, it does work. And I could demonstrate that, but the easiest way to demonstrate that actually is I could just put a .json on the end of one of these. Oh, wait a minute, I shut down the app. Is it worth it to start the app? Yeah, I'll start the app. So where was my part here? And I'll say run app again. So they have a built-in URL mapping, which has an extension, .xml or .json, will allow you to specify your MIME type. I mean, the REST advocates would have a bird at that, right? I mean, they'd much rather it be decoupled from the URL, and they want to do content negotiation through other mechanisms. But this does work. So here again was my app overall, and if I went into, say, the night controller, then there's index, and if I go index.json, there's the JSON version of them. See, I did a GET request where I specified the MIME type, and that's what the respond command is doing. It's looking at the MIME type of the request and then trying to provide it. And the scaffolded controllers do this automatically. Now, if you want to customize it, you can. But in general, I'm just using the build, add and remove pieces. You could flesh it out. You could write out your own model for exactly what you want generated. I've got other examples of that. But you see, I didn't do anything, and I got this automatically. So with this in mind, if I go back to my app here, in my index page on the castle, so this was the generated scaffolding. What I want to do is I want to retrieve all the castles, and then I want to render them inside a data table in a Google map. So what this looks like in general is, if I go back to, say, here, let's see, this is Google, shoot, I didn't want to do that. I want to go to Google chart map. Yeah, here we go. So this is Google chart project, the map visualizations, and they show you down here that this is how you do it. You have a script tag to load the JavaScript API from Google, and then you say load the visualization plugin version 1. We want the map section of it. It's this huge plugin. It's got tons of different pieces to it. I only want the map one. And then set on load callback to a function that's right below it, written right here. And in this function, they set array to data table, and they built their array and turned it into the data table, and then they just instantiated the map around a particular div and drew it. And that's all they did. Now that's fine. If you have latitudes and longitudes instead, then they say you could do it this way, lat, long, and name, and build it that way. But then we're faced with a problem. My problem is that my lat and longs are in my castles. And JavaScript doesn't know well, how am I going to get that data out of my Groovy domain objects and into JavaScript? Well, that RESTful web service comes to the rescue. So with that in mind, what I have here is, let me just go there directly, is in here, I have in the header, there's the load API, and here is my block of JavaScript. So I load the visualization map section. I set on load callback to be this, and there's, so I made a data table by hand. I added these 3 columns, my lat, long, and name, number, and string. And then this is the URL for pulling down all the castles in JSON form. I just put .json at the end. And that will grab all of them just the way it did in the browser. So now I've got them in a string, basically. This will allow, also up here, JavaScript library jQuery, okay, which comes with Grails. So I put that in as well. And now I can say, okay, get JSON on that string. We'll convert it to JSON objects. And when you're done, run through this function. So each one, take the castle and add a row to the data table with the latitude, the longitude, and then the city, comma, state. I probably should put the name in too, but just to show it working at all, that's what I did. And then once this is done, I've added rows to the data table for every castle I have. I create that map object in JavaScript around this div that I've got down below, the map one, and draw it, and that I have the behavior you just saw. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that the plugin used to do for me. Now that I don't want to wait for the plugin to come up to date, I figured, well, it's a nice use of the RESTful web service capability inside of Grails, that all I have to do is this. Now, to show you, if I go back to my castle list here, and I say, let's do a view source on this, then here is the load of jQuery. That's the one that's built into Grails. So that's not using a, what do they call it, a CDN, yeah, it's not using that. This is one that's actually downloaded and in the assets folder. So it is compressed at least, or at least compressed somehow. And then I also have in here my load of the JavaScript API from Google. And then you'll see this added in. It's just basically got the same JavaScript you just saw. I mean, nothing different there. And then the div I decided to put right above the table. And that's how we get this result. And the nice thing is I could say, well, let me add another castle, and the final resting place of the Grail was Castle R, carved into the living rock, as he died. Where should we put that? I suppose what's nearby? But pardon me, Waco? Yeah, that'll go over well. Now, by the way, this is a problem. Normally, when I do this for real, I would want to remove latitude and longitude from the form. I mean, I'm not letting the user set them. I'm setting them from a service. Yeah. And normally, do I go into the views and I delete those rows? Now I'm using the fields plugin. I can customize it, but I can't just take out those rows. I'd have to write out the whole form. And it's not as bad as it sounds, but I'd have to do more work than just taking a couple pieces out. And I didn't feel like doing it, so I didn't. See what I mean? So now if I go create, and it should find out a latitude and longitude for Waco, and I can go back to my list here again, and now if I mouse over it, I should see city, state, and it's all listed down below. And there's everything, okay? So just to summarize, because I did have slides, so let me at least show you what I had in mind here. Oh, there they are, okay? So there's the chapter in the user guide. They say they're using mix-ins. Groovy has pretty much deprecated mix-ins. They don't really want you to use them anymore in favor of traits now. Traits in Groovy are everything, which is like, wow, it's dangerously close to multiple inheritance, Looks like we're getting it back again. The list people were right all along, you know how it is. Now, I know in the underlying Grails infrastructure, they did do a lot of work to build traits into Grails. They've done a lot with it. They don't give you a lot of information about it, but there is something in the user guide. What I don't know is if they've replaced any of the testing mix-ins with traits. There was nothing in the user guide about it, but as we've seen, that's not necessarily a good indicator. Okay, so if they haven't, then they will at some point.
Yeah, I think they're still recommending mix-ins for tests.
Okay, because I'm just using them. I'm not doing anything with them. It's the test app and the open test report, which works very nicely. And now you could say phase : type, and you could use unit or integration. I don't know that I'd use functional anymore. Now that they've got Jeb built in, I could just do integration tests, and those work fine. That's the way they recommend. Of course, I don't do it that way anymore. And you don't have to say Spock anymore, because now that's the built-in unit testing framework. It's Spock. It's already built in. So the test for annotation lets you instantiate controllers and services as well as set them up for testing. On a domain class, you still use test for to tell it that this is a testing class and enable the domain plugins and everything, but you still have to instantiate the domain objects yourself there. But it will give me a controller field and a service field for those. We also have the mock annotation, which will basically mock your domain model. So you have all of those mechanisms built in. It uses an in-memory concurrent hash map for the database. There is a mock 4, and if I didn't do an expando, I would have used a mock 4, and you could specify the class and then say whether the expectations are loose or strong, and the strong expectation is mock. So it's that it's not just the right order with the right number of times. Right. Whereas if you set the expectation weak, loose is it's a stub. Okay, so it doesn't do the validation of the program, how many times you call the methods or in what order. Loose expectations, yes, the order method calls doesn't matter. Now, it should be that the number of times you call doesn't matter either, and yet when I did this in Grails 2.2 and 2.3, the number of times always came up to bite me. So I don't know if that's an error, or maybe I'm misunderstanding how they're interpreting the expectations. I haven't tried it with 3 yet. I just use my expando, but it's something to keep an eye out for. Loose equals false. It's almost like a double negative. I do have one double negative joke I can use, okay? So at least you'll have one. Most languages in the world don't use a double negative the way English does. For example, from what I understand in Chinese, if you say you're not going to do something, you're still not going to do it, maybe even more. You know, it's more of an emphasis than a contradiction. But the joke is that a professor's in front of the room and says, yeah, but there's no language in the world that has a double positive, you know, 2 yeses that mean a no, at which point a guy in the back of the room goes, yeah.
We have in Russian, if you say 3 times positive, it will be negative.
Really?
Ну да, конечно, means no.
But in the military, it's what I tell you 3 times is true.
Yeah.
Really? What I tell you 3 times is false. Isn't that interesting? Boy, could that lead to some confusion. Oh, wow. Very interesting. Thanks. I didn't know that. See, it was worth it for me to come here, too. Very good. So, at any rate, the biggest thing that jumped out at me about the testing was that I don't have to say mock for constraints tests anymore. And I was really surprised by that, because when I had the code in there, it said I don't even recognize the method. And I thought maybe that was just IntelliJ not knowing. But when I ran the test, it went, I don't know what that is. Huh. So if you look at the documentation, they seem to have removed that method from the documentation. So now I don't even need it. It's happening automatically. I don't know if Mach 4 is still in there. Probably is, because you generally do a Mach 4 for expectations as well. You know, not just for the GORM methods and everything. There's your domain class unit test mix-in, allows you to do all these different pieces. And then you also have your implicit objects, which are all coming, pardon me, they're all coming from Spring. You know, Spring has an entire package of mock objects, and Grails just leverage those as well. And you can add a mock service to the app context. It's available for dependency injection. I didn't bother in my case. I just used an expando. The integration tests now use the @integration annotation, and they can do rollbacks of transactions the way Spring test context works. You know, Spring test context is very convenient for rolling back transactions after every test. Very nice mechanism there. Functional test, Jeb now comes with Grails. So I don't know that people are going to use these alternative functional testing mechanisms where you recorded the driving of a browser so much as maybe this will really give a big push to Jeb now. We'll see. And then Spock, of course, you don't have to put it in there. Now that's built in. Spock tests, yeah, they end with spec. And I think I had something. Anybody ever use the build test data plugin? That's kind of a nice testing plugin. What it does is it will examine your domain classes, and when you invoke build, it will generate a valid object based on the constraints in the domain classes. I mean, it's very simple, but it does a really good job of that. So you don't have to come up with a valid one. You just ask the build test data plugin for one just by going domain class.build, and it generates it for you automatically. So very nice. I don't know if it's ported to 3.0 yet. Probably has, but I know it works great under 2.x. The fixtures plugin integrates with the build test data one, but I haven't seen whether this has been updated recently. I used to use Canoe web test. I thought that was pretty good, but again, I'm going to use Jeb much more because it's built in. I don't remember why I put in auto test before. And that's basically everything I have. So the testing of the controllers and the services is pretty easy. The mock objects are there and everything. Now, oh yeah, and I had to put in the, oh, you know what I can do? I can give you a coupon code for Manning books. Think that'd be okay? Be willing to, I mean, hey, you got to get something for hanging out here this late, right? You know? Yeah, if you were to go to oh yeah, I'm sure that's exactly why everybody hung out. Yeah, exactly. If I go to Manning.com, what's the deal of the day? Anyone can create an app, and then it'll be your job to maintain that mess, right? I should not be cynical like that, should I? But at any rate, on any book that you get, and by the way, Groovy in Action, 2nd edition, is at the printers. You know, I mean, it should be out next month for real this time. You know, what did Dear tweet yesterday? It's 912 pages or something. Wow. Yeah, massive doorstop book. I can't even imagine. You know, but it's finally done. You know, I have not heard of anybody working on a Grails 3 book. I mean, Peter and Glenn, Peter Ledbrook and Glenn Smith, who wrote Grails in Action, they did 2nd edition last year. They're not eager to go jump into 3, yeah, you know. They just released, and theirs was written on 2.3 but they ran everything under 2.4 to make sure it worked. Definitive Guide to Grails 2 is on 2.0 for crying out loud. But, pardon me? Oh, yeah, it's that old. And I know that if you talk to Jeff Brown, he doesn't even like the word A-Press anymore, much less working with those people. So he has no work on that. They just started their new job. You know, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although they would be the guys to do it, but I haven't heard anything coming. out there for Grails. Programming Grails is an advanced Grails book, which is an he's going to do anything on 3. Yeah. Now, what I can tell you is I'm doing all these video courses. I'm definitely going to do a Grails video course, and I'll do it under 3. But, I mean, a video course isn't going to have the same depth as a big book resource. That's what books are for. And I'm not writing that book. I can tell you that one right now. You know, I got enough to the great Groovy in Action. Groovy in Action 2nd edition. It should be anytime. You can get the MEEP now, and as soon as it comes out, you'll just re-download the PDF. But that book is at the printers. It should be any day. So I don't know who's going to break the Grails 3 book or when they're going to do it. I hope to have a Grails video course by the end of the summer on 3, but I hope somebody's thinking about it. We'll see. It probably depends on how quickly Grails 3 becomes adopted too. But if there's no book, people don't adopt it, right? I used to call that, you know, the what do they call it, the hype cycle? Yeah, well, the Riley curve, right? The hype cycle, you know, shows the rise up to the peak of inflated expectations, and then you fall down into the trough of disillusionment, and then you go up the slope of enlightenment to the plateau of productivity, right? And every technology supposedly follows this curve, except that, you know, Gartner came up with this, and they throw dots on that map, but there's no data. You know what I mean? It's just all hand waving. And if you watch them from year to year, it's not like things progress along. They're just making it all up, you know, but it looks good. Well, at any rate, I used to call the beginning after the technology trigger, but before you start heading up to the peak of inflated expectations, I used to call that the O'Reilly gap or the Manning gap, which is like until there's an O'Reilly or a Manning in action book on it, nobody's going to do it, you know? So I don't know when we're going to get the Grails 3 book to get people over that gap yet. We'll see. I think you're right, except that the number 3 tends to put in people's minds, this is a very mature framework. Remember, that was the whole Microsoft mantra, never buy anything before version 3. And in fact, what's happened with Grails 3 is while they've improved it in a huge number of ways, they've introduced tons of annoying changes, you know, that are not well documented. They really need documentation. They really need a book, or at least get that documentation on the website up to date.
It's kind of got an awkward pause because of the whole ending of the sponsorship, right? And then now they're getting their feedback in.
Maybe you're right.
Gap of a couple of months of kind of nothing going on.
So at any rate, if I do my search and I go find my book, Making Java Groovy, and then I go and add it to the cart, you know, of course you want the print book too, not just the ebook, right? Yeah, right. What I wanted to do this for is not to convince you to buy the book. It's to say, if you go down to the place where it says coupon code, here's the coupon code you want. It's my last name, Kousen 37, with a 37 after it. Okay? And if you put that in for any book at Manning, if I click apply now, you'll see that you'll get a 37% savings off of that. And that works on the MEEP books and everything, but you do have to do it at Manning. It doesn't work at Amazon. Now, sometimes Amazon will beat that. If you want to try Kousen 85 and see how that works, you know, or if you really think it through, you try Kousen 105 and see if they'll pay you to take it away. Right. Let me know how that works out. It's still working. It's been a while now. It's been a couple of years. I should say tomorrow, man, buy everything now, but I'm not getting anything for it, so you know. It's just the coupon code that I give out to people, you know, as a Manning author. So we'll see, you know, but be my guest. Give it a try if you like. So at any rate, that's everything I had. There's all the different, I suppose I should stop the screen share. How do I, oh, here, stop screen share. And then, do they see the, oh yeah, it's so dark in here. You can turn the light on if you like, just for the people watching on the. Manning has offices in many places, one of which is in New York. I think their headquarters are in the city somewhere, you know, in New York. But they are a distributed company like everybody else. The people work all over the country, you know. I mean, O'Reilly's in Sebastopol and in Cambridge, Mass. But Manning, I think, is in New York City. I think that's where the, I don't know where the printing offices or things like that are, you know. Still a little dark, but I'll live with it.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah, oh, thank you very much. I'll definitely send you those slides. The code is not yet, let's see if I clean it up. I'll put it in a GitHub repo and I'll send you a link. Because I haven't done that yet because I was still tweaking it for, you know, Grails 3. but I think it's mature enough now. I should be probably giving that out. Okay, so I'll send you a link to that, but I can give you the slides tonight. And just, where am I off to? Well, the Dallas No Fluff event is this weekend, and then I go to do a Grails class in San Diego next week, and then I go to O'Reilly and Sebastopol for some video recording on Android this time, and then I go to the Gradle Summit, and then I get to go home for a day, and then go to South Carolina for class. So it just goes on and on. You know.